Scripture says God gave us a spirit not of what? Fear.
Fear.
But of power and love and self-control.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to get too deep with it, but when we talk about the spirit of fear, I kind of, again, this idea of a great reversal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fear is good,
Mm-hmm.
but we are not supposed to fear creation.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't have a fear of God, we still have fears. Even if you're atheist and you don't believe in God, you still have fears.
Mm-hmm.
You can't run away from that.
Mm-hmm.
You still have a fear, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And not fearing God, you what? Fear creation.
Mm-hmm.
I fear the unknown. I fear, death. I
Mm-hmm.
fear all these other things when you were never meant to fear creation.
Mm-hmm.
You know the scary thing about like scripture when it comes to fear? It don't never say fear the demons. It don't never say fear the devil.
Mm-hmm.
It says fear God.
Fear God.
I was always like, I remember even before I was saved, like those horror movies, especially like The Exorcist and stuff like that.
I
man,
can't stand them now. I won't
bug
watch
me. They bug me out.
I won't watch
And
it.
it's like the whole point is feeding off people's fear.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I'm not supposed to fear that.
Mm-hmm.
There's something far more frightening than that. And it's God. And it's like we don't look at God in that way. Like I said last week, we were talking about love.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we like to picture God,
Mm-hmm.
as love.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going to be faithful to Scripture tells me I ought to fear the Lord.
He's got a multiple thing.
God is multifaceted. It's like,
Yeah.
we want to talk about God's love because that feels good to us, but no, we got to talk about the fear of God,
the Lord.
the fear of the Lord.
Mm.
And so I start moving into that in more detail, telling people, hey, you're gonna have a fear. There's one or two fears. You're gonna fear creation, or you're gonna fear the Creator.
Mm-hmm.
And in not fearing the Creator, you inevitably fear creation. But God didn't call us to fear creation. He called us to fear Him. Now, we've got to understand and unpack that understanding of fear,
Right.
and fearing God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say, and this is scripture. Let me see if I can find it. I say, the fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, and that's Proverbs 8:13. And then another Proverbs 16:6 says,
Mm-hmm.
by the fear of the Lord, one turns away from evil. And I wanted to touch on this point because
God is a holy God.
Because God is a holy God. My issue with those who deny God, those who are evolutionists, those who are atheists, I don't have a problem with you sharing that viewpoint, but you've got to be consistent with your viewpoint. If there's no God, then you should be perfect in all that you do, because you have a concept of right and wrong. You have a concept of good and bad and those concepts. But in denying God, you don't live a righteous life.
Mm.
So there must be a standard of righteousness that you ought to conform to. Like if you say I don't believe in God and you live a perfect life, man, I can't say nothing against you.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at people who deny God, they still in the same boat as we all in, because no
Right.
one turns away from evil.
Right.
We all do evil.
That's our propensity.
There you go. We all do evil, and as a result of doing evil, it's like that's the very thing that God hates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand why you don't want to fear God, because then you can do what you want to do.
Mm.
There's no accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm an atheist and I say I don't believe in God, I can live my life any way that I want to live it, because there's ultimately no accountability
Mm-hmm.
for how I live.
And that's what we want.
And that's what we want. So being an atheist is not simply due to the evidence that you see. Being an atheist is a heart issue, because I know in my heart that I've done wrong.
Right.
But if I have to concede to a concept that there's a God that exists, this God is going to hold me accountable.
He's gonna hold me accountable.
So in order to not hold myself accountable, I'm
Mhm.
going to deny any existence
Mm.
of a God.
Let me start breaking down some of these scriptures you start hitting.
Uh-huh.
One you start talking about, because here's the accountability we want to run from.
Mm-hmm.
The boastful shall not stand before your eyes. You hate all evildoers. Hopefully one is beginning to see why we ought to fear God. And he says, scripture says, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. That's in Romans. And you start breaking down in Romans 3:18. There is no fear of God before their eyes.
So when we talk
So what are you
about
seeing in that
fear,
text?
we're talking about not, like I said, when we think of fear, we think of the horror movie.
Right.
That's what we're thinking of.
Mhm.
But when we talk about fear, not fearing
So
creation,
yeah.
fearing God, what does that mean? Turning away from sin. Why do we turn away from sin? Because God is holy.